On this episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups, we are not working on the Black Mosquito because we were waiting for parts. We are working on this 1972 Classic Mini all the way from the UK. So folks, this is the new project. I had a customer reach out to me and ask, can I rebuild his engine? I said, sure thing. So that's what we're going to be doing. As I said, this car has come all the way from the UK. I'm going to grab my phone because the customer has actually sent me some very interesting information. Essentially, his father owned this car in the UK. His son, which is now the owner of it, moved to Australia probably 10, 15 years ago, I believe. And he said that his father passed away, unfortunately. His mum was going to sell the car, so he said, no, you know what, I'm going to buy the car off you. I'm going to ship it all the way to Australia. So he got it complied, and as you can see, it's still got the original plates down below, the historic plates that are on the car. So he brought it to the country and said, no, I need to keep this thing for the keepsake of keeping my dad's memory alive. So he approached me and said, I want to get this car back on the road. I want to get it fixed and running right. At the moment, it's got a little bit of a bottom end knock, and he's had it assessed before, and they believe it to be a bottom end or big end bearing, should I say. So essentially what we're working on here is a 1972 Mk3 Morris Mini in BMC British Leyland Glacier White. And it was first registered on the 8th of August 1972. Started as a Mini 1000 and is now a period correct Coupe S replica. It runs a 1275 GT A+ engine. Well, that's what we're going to assume anyway. It definitely doesn't have an 11 stud head, which anyone out there who knows Coupe S's or the 11 stud heads, I was always under the impression every 1275 had one. So please let me know in the comment section below if I am right or if a 9 stud head can be fitted to a 1275. It's got 43,000 original miles on it, which is approximately 69,000 kilometers. So for a 52-year-old car, it's done pretty well. So we're gonna go over this thing, we're gonna check it out, we're gonna pull the engine out, we're gonna work through, we're gonna strip it, we're going to do some head work. We're going to ball the cylinders. He wants to try and push a 1380 out of this. We're going to do a mild cam. We're going to do the usual timing chain setup with ARP head studs. Keep this thing period correct. So everything's going to be internal of the engine that we're not going to actually be able to see. Everything external, it's just going to remain as factory as we possibly can. Now, one thing we don't have here in Australia is this bonnet release mechanism. So, well, pull that one. Oh, there we go. Just a bit of a delay. So this actually tripped me out the very first time, which was in fact yesterday, in which I got this car delivered to my place. It is a beautiful, beautiful little car, and I'm super excited to work on it, and Kev behind the camera as well is going to be giving us a hand. So this is the old girl. Let's start pulling the engine out. I'm not going to cover a lot of it and do a lot of talking, only because we've already covered how to pull an engine out before, but it's pretty straightforward. All this stuff, as I said, is going to remain period correct. We're just going to also change the 2 little pancake air filters on the little twin SU carbies. We'll get that tuner when we're done and just make this thing just a little bit nicer to drive, and hopefully it's ready for the Rolston Classic 2024. Let's get to work. Well folks, welcome back to part 2 of this build, or day 2 should I say. It was probably a couple of seconds since you saw me talk at the last one and all of the stuff in between. So essentially I had Kev come around last night, or Apprentice Kev. He couldn't handle it tonight because, you know, working on an 850 is as much as he's ever done. So he's pulled the pin for tonight. Not really, he did have to work, so it's just me running solo. I'm gonna work probably for the next sort of hour and a half and keep going with it. Essentially, we've removed the radiator, we've drained the engine oil, the coolant. The radiator's out, top and bottom radiator hose. I removed the alternator, the starter motor, the distributor, the air filters, and I've got Kev working on the driver's side of the car. We have found a couple of things along the way. It does have an electric fan, as you can see over that side fitted there. There is a switch inside the car. It also has a leaking clutch slave cylinder. Yep, that's right. A couple of small differences between the Australian and English Minis. Obviously, majority of Minis are made in England that we see here in Australia. Not so much from around the world, other than the Black Mosquito beside me here. Speaking of Minis, you can probably hear one outside idling. Sorry, I just took notice of a northern bush that's in there. I might get rid of those. There's a Mini idling outside. That is just the Minimatic. I've just finished doing the headlights on that. So I've just finished taking it for its last run. I'm checking everything, make sure everything's fine. So you probably saw that in a previous episode. If not, make sure you check it out on my channel. We're just gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going with it tonight for a bit longer. And then tomorrow, or the next part of this, we're gonna be removing the engine. So let's get back to it. Something when I was taking off the exhaust and the inlet manifold. So once I removed it, it was quite odd because I can't actually find where I've put it now. But there was 2 gaskets for the manifold, the inlet manifold. That goes down the back there. So one went here and then the other went over there. But yet you can see that there is a gasket there. Really unsure why they've put a second gasket there. It really just doesn't make sense. If it's not seating properly, then you need to machine something down, whether it be the thickness of these, or maybe something's not flush properly. But like, I really just fail to understand why that was done like that. These are things that you find when you're working on cars, and I think by the look of this, it's also been poured and polished, which means one less thing for us to do, which isn't a bad thing. Just means that the head will probably just get a refurb, which is nice. Let's keep cracking. Alright, part 3, or day 3 of pulling this apart. So far I've probably spent a good 2.5 to 3 hours pulling this thing apart. We are pretty much at the stage now where engine's ready to come out. Everything's disconnected, air, fuel, clutch, exhaust. That was a bit of a pain to get off because it was a little bit rusted, being a UK car. Now, it was only surface rust. It wasn't flakes and chunks falling off it, so it's not a drama. It just took a lot of caressing. There's a few things around the engine bay I just want to tidy up while I'm here. One thing I did notice is that the dash lights don't work when I drove it in. I've got the engine crane behind me, and I've got the door open as well, so hopefully no people go flanging past with their cars whilst we're filming. Once she comes out, we're then just going to put the car back down on the ground. We're going to push it outside. I'm going to probably stick it on chocks or jack stands, lock it all up, cover it, and then get to work on stripping the engine. Once the engine's stripped, it then goes straight out to the machine shop, in which they're going to assess it. And we're just going to have to work out obviously what is in there and what we need to change and upgrade, all that sort of stuff. So it is a Friday night. I do have a nice little light beverage, a little skinny bitch as they call it. So just going to enjoy that and then get cracking on this. So first things first, like I've spoken about many times on the channel before, and like you saw with the Black Mosquito, we're using the trusty lifting device. Make sure as well, when you're using this, you use genuine studs or upgraded studs such as ARP. That will ensure that you don't cause any issues, and you certainly don't run the risk of dropping this monstrosity of an engine onto your foot. Speaking of this monstrosity of an engine, how much does a classic mini cylinder head, block, gearbox and clutch weigh? Does anyone know? If you do, please leave in the comment section below. I'm going to say I could probably deadlift this thing, but because it's so awkward, I'm not going to. I would probably say 65 kilos, maybe. Someone please let me know in the section below. Just realised and found out that the engine crane from work that I borrowed doesn't have a hydraulic ram on it. Because it doesn't have the hydraulic ram, I cannot lift this engine out. The only other way to get out is manhandle this thing, which I am definitely not doing, dropping the whole thing out the bottom, or calling a mate and asking if I can borrow his engine crane. Super frustrated because it is coming up to 9:30 at night. I'm gonna have to make a call, get him to come around, drop his off, let me borrow it. I don't know why. Strange, but anyway, I didn't even notice, and there's probably no reason for me to notice up until this point. FML. Welcome back. For the fourth time, I worked out who had the hydraulic ram from the crane, went around to his place, I rocked his roof, told him to give it back, got it, assembled it, and now it's time to finally remove the engine. It has been 24 hours since you saw that last clip, which was about 3 seconds ago. I did remove the rocker cover. It looks like it does have standard rockers in it, which is fine. We are going to be upgrading those, so over the right shoulder, straight into the bin. We're going to be running 1.3 to 1 rockers with a decent cam. Now, this thing apparently has a 246 camshaft in it. Haven't heard of one myself. Anyone in the comments, please leave it below if you have. Let's get to it. Let's get this engine out and let's get this car out of here, out the front. I'm going to lock it up, cover it, and then start the disassembly process of the engine. Alright, so as you can see, we have moved the little rocket out of the garage. We've now got the engine So now comes the process of completely stripping this thing. I do have a bucket over there and under there, which I'm probably going to use to separate all the parts in it. It is important to make sure that you try and label as much stuff as you possibly can. And as we did with the Morris Minor, if you haven't already seen on my channel, please check it out. We labeled absolutely everything. Every bolt, nut, screw, washer, piece, whatever it is, put it in a bag, write a tag on it. That way you know exactly where it comes from. Now, after you've rebuilt an engine a couple of times, or even a car, or a microwave, I don't know, a bow and arrow, whatever it may be, you start to learn where things go. Those people out there will know exactly where each screw goes. If you just threw everything in a box and just gave it to someone and said, hey, can you fix this for me, and just put it all back together, chances are they'll probably know what everything is and where it all goes. And that's a skill that you acquire over a long period of time. So we're going to do exactly that. This actually has the very rare style breather type timing cover on it. Completely off topic. With the 1275 that we did a couple of years ago now, we looked for one of those and we could not find it for the life of us. I don't think there are any available anymore. No longer available, I'm pretty certain. So let's just jump straight into it. I'm going to label everything, so it's probably going to take me a while. I'll probably try and skip over most of it, as you've probably already seen in previous videos on how to do this. It is very, very simple, but if you're unsure, make sure you document everything, whether it be via photos, videos, following videos on YouTube, on mine, on other people's videos, and make sure you label where everything goes. The most important thing. Right, so I just did some measuring of the bores, and it came at 72.2 millimeters, which equates to 1330 cc. So I was wondering why this thing went fairly well for what it is. So it definitely has been bored. So hopefully we should just be able to give this thing a hone. New set of pistons in there, in the camshaft, and it should pretty much just bring it back to where we need this thing to be, essentially. Quite impressed actually that it has had something done to it in regards to it being bored out. It definitely goes better than a standard 1275, but definitely want to try and get some more power out of it. So I'm pretty certain the head's been ported like we spoke about earlier in the episode. That's a really good sign. So if it's just adding the camshaft in, a vernier timing chain, and high lift rockers, you know, we should be able to get some decent horsepower out of this thing. Now the bottom end, or the big end knock, should I say, is one thing that we do need to look at, simply because it was a concern for the customer. So even though it's, you know, sounded all right, it obviously wasn't the best when I drove. It wasn't clanging off its head, but it was still banging around a little. It definitely didn't sound 100% how it should. We do need to suss it out before we send it off, just so we can be 100% sure that's exactly what it was. Next thing is we're going to remove the transfer case housing. So I'll flip the engine around, and we'll whip that off, take the flywheel off, and then once that's off, pull the timing cover off, rip the gearbox off, flip it upside down, and remove the crankshaft. All right, so I've just quickly put the flywheel locking tool in. I'm just going to crack the crankshaft nut just here, and when I take that cover off on the other side, I'll be able to just go onto the toilet. I'll be able to crack the flywheel bolt as well. Okay, that's a little bit more liquid than I'd like to see. I'm going to grab the drain tin, stick it under there, catch the rest of that. Not that there's going to be much in there. Really good idea, these really flat drain trays. Pretty much all my customers who I build an engine for will generally do any sort of major engine work to their cars. I'll give them one of them. They're not expensive, but it's just a really nice thing to do, and it's a really nice thing to have in the garage as well. They're super low, they're only like an inch tall, so they slide directly underneath your car and are easy to get under there without jacking the car up. So the only thing I hate about spilling coolant on the floor, it just looks like it makes such a big mess, especially on polished concrete. But in actual fact, there's not really a great deal of it. Alright, so I was going to do an upgraded crankshaft pulley, but as I said, the customer wants to try and keep it as OG and genuine as we can, so we're not going to worry about replacing it. Not at this stage anyway. It definitely looks like the original one. Yeah, you can see there, it's probably a bit hard to see on camera. See if I can zoom in. There is the rubber around here as well that is starting to deteriorate. It's probably gone all hard over the 60 odd years of it being on the road. Now, like we've spoken about before, these are different sizes, so just make sure that you use the correct socket to be able to get them off. I think they are 9/16 and 5/16, I believe. Sorry, 7/16 is the other size that you need to do them. No? Oh, there are actually 3 different sizes on this one. That is really odd. Oh well, here's what it is. There's nothing I can do about that. Might actually send these parts off to go and get sandblasted, just that way when they go back on, we got a nice, fresh, clean surface. I do have a sandblaster here, but it'll just take me forever to be able to do it. So I figure, well, for what it's worth, might as well just spend the money and just get someone to do it for us. That way it's just easier, one less thing for us to worry about. Because the only real time that I've got to do this is in the evenings when my kids are in bed. My missus is watching Love Island, or one of those silly reality shows. Now we do just have to be careful removing this cover because, as I said, this is a bit of a rare cover and we don't want to do any damage to it. Now this is odd. One of these has a washer, the other one doesn't. Oh, whoever's done this just, oh my goodness. Frustrating. When you pull stuff apart that other people have done and this sort of thing happens, it's just bugs me. Really bugs me. Alright, try and work out where and how we can get this thing in without damaging it. And they've painted the engine as well whilst it's, oh, there we go, been together. Yeah, as expected. Standard timing chain. And it looks like they have made the modification as well to suit the double row timing chain. They've ground down this as well, which we might need to grind further, I think. I'm just going to go put this in my drain tin, just let it all drain out. So I'm just going to fill up the drain tin down below just with oil. I need to go charge my light, so let's continue on with the 5th part of this build tomorrow. Alright, 5th part of this engine disassembly, probably the world's slowest classic mini engine disassembly. I've had a few hiccups along the way, and just looking here, it looks like there's been a little bit of Celastic used on that. You don't need to use Celastic on these gaskets, like seriously, you can just use a bit of aviation sealant and that'll be fine. Just whatever you do, don't paint these components on the entire side, sorry, on both sides, and then expect it to seal, because it's definitely not. I've seen that done many times before. We're going to keep cracking on. We're going to take the timing gear off, the front plate. We're going to take the transfer case housing off on the other side, remove that, flip the engine upside down, take the gearbox off, have a look at the bearings inside there, take the head studs out, and then we're pretty much ready to send this thing off to the machine shop. As I said yesterday, or last part of this episode, we're going to send a couple of components away to get painted. That way it'll just look that little bit better when we put it all back together. All right, so I'm just going to rotate the engine. Let's have a look. All right, cool. Put that down there. So just remove the top housing bolts. These don't actually have the lock tabs like we've seen in previous episodes, and previous builds that we've done. I'm also going to be renewing all the studs and nuts on this. Just, it's a good practice
to do so when you're doing a engine build like this. That way, you know, it's just peace of mind that everything is new and you're not going to have dramas in the future. You can also see the stud and nut kits that I'll talk about on a episode of Minisport on my channel and how to install them. We've spoken about that for many different things, especially with the Morris Minor engine build when we did the manifold stud and nut installation. Very simple method to be able to get them in and out. So we'll follow the same procedure when we go to strip it, when we send it off to get the block machined. There's another reason why you use a good drain tray when you're working on an engine, something like this, because it enables you to catch everything that falls out from underneath it and doesn't make a massive mess on your nice clean floor. All right, so I just removed the oil pump, standard slot drive, as you can see here. This is being used as the gasket that's being used here is just the standard gasket. Definitely do not recommend using them. Get the upgraded one. They're literally $1 more, which is probably about 50 pence. It's not worth it, in my opinion, for, you know, not even double the cost. Get yourself the upgraded gasket when you're using new ones, especially when it comes time to the oil pump gasket. We've spoken about those as well with Minisport. The customer did tell me as well, it's supposed to have a 246 cam in it. I think I mentioned that before. I'm just trying to see if this has any numbers on it. It has some part numbers, maybe someone can help elaborate on this. It is, trying to see, is that a 5 or an S? All right, so we got Sierra Whiskey 507 Bravo. So anyone in the comment section that can identify what their cam is, please let me know. All right, so now we're up to the point of detaching the gearbox from the engine block. All I generally like to do is just grab a pry bar and just put it between one of the main bearing caps and the gearbox. Give it a bit of a wiggle. And it is on dowels as well, so it is worthwhile noting. You know, we'll take a little bit of persuasion to be able to lift it up off there. And that's the reason why it hasn't flipped off it. So let's try and find somewhere to grasp onto it. Pull the gearbox straight off. Probably should have prepared this a bit better. All right, now, next part, should be able to pull the camshaft out. All right, so we're just gonna pull it out from the back. Just gotta give it a bit of a wiggle. All right. So you can see here, I'll see if I can just grab my rag again. I'll show you guys up a little bit closer. It does have some wear marks on it, on the camshaft itself. You can actually see where the lobes have been wearing on the lifters. So you can see here. So you want to be checking for any sort of scoring and damage. Definitely been doing their job, which is great, but there's definitely spots where it hasn't been touching, and that's what my concern is. You can see here, like this one where my thumb is, it's completely shiny, then it goes off, and then there's a line, it's not touching again, it's touching there, and then it's rolling around. So that is a bit of a concern, I believe. Maybe I'm completely wrong. This has a part number 281. Is it one? No, yeah, 281 and 161. Not sure if that's the cam profile part number. Anyone in this comment section, please just let me know. We're going to put that off to the side. This does also have a lock tab, so it is important to make sure that you keep those and don't just throw it out, because if you do, you're going to regret life later and you're going to have to buy another one. Well, the awkward moment when the other camera goes dead and I end up talking to myself for longer than expected. So here we have a bit of an issue. As you can see here, it's been wearing fine. However, see this little lock tab here? I'll try and put a photo on the screen just so you guys can see that is not fitted correctly. That is actually the wrong size bearing. I'm 90% confident that is the wrong bearing, or it's been fitted incorrectly. It needs to be wider and it needs to be fitting in that groove. See how the bearing isn't seated there whatsoever? That needs to be moved over this way, probably about 3 mil. That is not correct. That's probably not the problem, but it's definitely not correctly fitted. Let's pull the others out and let's have a look and see how much more damage has been done, if any. All right, so we got everything pulled apart at the moment. There's nothing wrong with the crank bearings, which is good, or the main bearing, should I say. So I've checked both sides of them, the caps, the bearings are all good. The big ends, the only one I've found is cylinder number 1, which is down here. You can actually see in the light, I'll try and put a photo there. It's actually cracked and worn away, that hardening in that corner there. So that's likely our problem as to the noise that the customer was hearing. The bearings aren't too bad, which is good. So now we're just going to send it away to get it all checked and make sure that everything is back to where it needs to be, and that if anything else needs to be done, the machinist gets it done. That camshaft that was in there is also an SW10, so an SW5, which is a Swift tune cam. It said that they make more horsepower down low compared to the SW10, but they only they only make power up to about 5,500 RPM, which isn't an issue. You know, the customer's not revving the ringer out of this thing. Whereas the SW10 makes 10 brake horsepower more than the SW5 and revs to 7,000 RPM. So it's going to give us a better compression, better stroke. Sorry, not stroke. It's going to give us better air and fuel inside the cylinder, mixed with things like a light flywheel and rockers as well. We're going to get the best out of this engine we can. Pretty much I'm going to send it to the machine shop, get them to check it all over. If we need new bearings and stuff, we're going to do that. And pretty much everything else that's in there, I'm pretty sure the crank should be fine. There's no real damage to it. There's no wear and tear, so that's really good. There's a heap of parts we're just going to upgrade on this thing, but I'm glad we actually found this now, and we actually found something when pulling it apart. The last thing you want to do is pull something apart, go to this extent and find out that nothing's wrong with it, and then go, well, let's put it all back together. You've just wasted time. So, you know, moving forward from here, there's a lot of upgrades we're going to do to try and get this thing getting a little bit more power, and we're also going to upgrade the 1.25 inch SU carbies to 1.5 inch, which will then enable us to make it flow that little bit better. So I'm going to send it off to the machine shop. It'll be probably a couple of weeks before you see it again. We're going to get everything cleaned. If he wants, we're going to do a gearbox upgrade. If not, we're just going to leave it. Other than that, hope you enjoyed the little series. We'll catch you on the next episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups and the 1330 Mark III Mini.